Hello YouTube. It's my first time making a real video here, but I saw a video from Human1011, a great linguistic content creator, about something called the Gay Fanfic Problem, and I thought it was super funny because it shows how ambiguous some pronouns in English can be. You see, the pronouns in English, they're split into different groups. You have it, which is kind of an inanimate singular pronoun. You have they, which is ambiguous in terms of animacy. It's ambiguous in terms of gender, but it either means plural or a singular without gender. And then you have he or she, which are singular third-person pronouns, which indicate some sort of animacy, and they talk about the gender, right? So if you consider Jack and Jill going to a party, maybe Jack is going to the party and he's looking for Jill, but he doesn't want to be seen by her. While Jack was looking for Jill at the party, he saw her. While Jack was looking for Jill at the party, she saw him. It's very clear as to who we're talking about. This gay fanfic problem arises where, let's say it's Jack and John. While Jack was looking for John at the party, he saw him. Who saw who? This phrase could be easily interpreted as Jack saw John or as John saw Jack, right? So it's super interesting. There are things in American Indigenous languages called switch reference systems, and they're not exclusive to American Indigenous languages, but I'm going to show you some examples as to how we disambiguate these certain situations in, for example, Muscogee, one of my own ancestral languages that I study. Muscogee's switch reference system operates using these suffixes it and in. It refers to a subject of the sentence, or if it's on a verb, it means that the next clause is going to have the same subject that this clause had, okay? Whereas in refers to any non-subject of a sentence. Or if it's used on a verb, it refers to that the next clause is not going to be the same subject. Now, this might be hard to see, so I'm going to give you some glosses here from a very good grammar by Jack Martin of Muscogee. I recommend you read it if you're more interested after this video. Ifa means dog in Muscogee. Bozi means cat. And the way we would say the dog chases the cat would be Ifa bozi əsː'idʒɪdə. Okay, əsː'idʒɪdə. That means the dog is chasing the cat. It's obvious because of the order. If we want to optionally put these suffixes on, we can say ifat bozin əsː'idʒɪdə. Ifat bozin əsː'idʒɪdə. Right? So the dog, subject, cat, non-subject, chasing. That's how we want to interpret that. What if we have two verbs? We want to say that while barking, the dog was chasing the cat. So we're going to take the verb wohida, which means to bark. We're going to say ifat wohit bozin əsː'idʒɪdə. Okay? So this ifat is still the subject. And now we say wohit. You see the T at the end, it's saying, okay, this next verb that's coming afterwards, that is going to have the same exact subject as this verb. So we don't have to say it again, right? We don't have to say ifat wohit, ifat bozin əsː'idʒɪdə. We can just say ifat wohit bozin əsː'idʒɪdə because we've marked it with the same subject marker, right? It saves us time and it takes away ambiguity. What if we want to switch the subject of the next clause? The dog is still barking because cats don't bark. The dog is barking. But what if the cat's chasing the barking dog, right? I've seen that happen plenty of times in my life where you see a dog barking, help, 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 while the cat is chasing them, right? So imagine that situation. How might we do that? All we do is we switch these two prefixes, or suffixes rather, at the end of these words. So we still have ifat wogin, right? So ifat, it's still the subject of this verb. So ifa, te, subject, right? Ifa, te, ifat, subject. Wogit was how we said it before, but now we're saying wogin. So the second you see that N, you say, okay, I know that the dog is barking, but this N is telling me that this next verb is not being performed by the dog. Now we say 보sit, right? Before the posi had an N, which means it was not the subject, right? Now it's saying 보sit, which means that the 보sit, the cat, is the subject of this sentence, okay? So, ifat woken 보sit əsː'eɪdʒɪdə. Now we're saying, while the dog was barking, the cat chased the dog, right? It has to be the dog because the dog's not the subject, and we just mentioned it. You see how we can take away ambiguity with just literally one letter difference? It shows you how elegant and complex a lot of Native American languages are, in this example, Muscogee. So, ifat woget bozin əsː'eɪdʒɪdə, the barking dog chases the cat. Ifat wogen bozit əsː'eɪdʒɪdə, the barking dog is being chased by the cat, right? The cat is chasing the barking dog. While the dog barks, the cat chases the dog. You can translate it as any of these different ways of subordinating verbs in English. So if we were to take that back to our gay fanfic example, I'm going to just use some liberty and I'm going to import these suffixes into English for the verbs, right? We don't have to mark the subject and all that. I don't want to make it too complicated, but let's take a look at my hypothetical sentence, right? While Jack was looking for John at the party, he saw him, right? While Jack was looking for John, he saw him. Who saw who? Let's try to use these suffixes and imagine how this might alleviate some of the ambiguity in English. Obviously, I'm not proposing that we do this. I just want to show you some examples as to how we can disambiguate things using some systems which probably most of you never even knew existed in the world because they're so far from the reality of Indo-European languages. So let's take a look. We want to say Jack looking for John. He saw him. Who saw who? Jack looking it for John. He saw him. You see the T there? That means that the verb saw is going to have the same subject as the verb looking. And who was looking? We know that. It was Jack. Jack was the one who was looking. So Jack is looking for John. What if we want to say, well, Jack was looking for John, John saw Jack, without having to stop using pronouns and make it a clunky sentence? We would say, Jack looking in for John, he saw him, right? Now that in is saying, okay, Jack is the one that's looking, but pay attention because the next verb, we're done with Jack. End of story. Now we're talking about what John was doing, which was seeing him, okay? So I put these examples just so that you get an idea as to the logic behind this idea of switch reference, because there's many ways, many techniques to disambiguate third-person pronouns when they are of the same class, right? In this example, our class is a masculine pronoun. There's two men, and we know that they're men, we know their gender, we know they're singular. So do we want to have to say, when Jack was looking for John, Jack saw John, and repeat their names every time? Well, in English, we kind of have to because there's ambiguity in the gay fan fictions. And I really appreciate Human 1011 for sharing this with me because I've been researching switch reference in many different languages around the world, specifically in American Indigenous languages. And another one that I study, I live here in Brazil, is Tupi, right? Old Tupi. And in the Tupi Guarani languages, you have these two pronouns. You have o, which is a pronoun which refers to the subject of the main clause, and you have e, which is a pronoun which refers to some third person non-subject of the main clause. So, for example, let's say after the party, Jack took John to his house, right? It's getting steamy. He took him to his house. Whose house? He took him to John's house or he took him back to Jack's house? We don't know. So in Tupi, instead of saying his, we would use this o or we would use this e in different sentences, right? So if I said, again, I'm importing this into English because if I show you a whole sentence in Tupi, it's going to get complicated. I just want to show you how this one grapheme, this one morpheme works in the language. What it would be is you take this sentence. After the party, Jack took John to O house, right? This O is saying it's the possessor of the subject of the main clause. So we know, oh, Jack took John to his own house, right? Because he is the subject. He took him to his own house. Whereas if we said Jack took John to E house, we know that it's Jack's house, or John's house, rather. Should have used names with not two J's. But the E represents possession of the non-subject in the sentence, which in this case is John. If we use O, it represents the subject of the sentence, which in this case is Jack. In English, we don't have this distinction. We got to use more words on top of the words we have. We say his own house. Took him to his own house. Because the own, most likely, it's not 100%, but most likely is referring to the same subject of the sentence, right? And I just thought that was interesting because there's certain dilemmas which happen in English and Portuguese and many Indo-European languages and many non-Indo-European languages for that matter, which don't happen in other languages because we have techniques of switch reference and we have different pronouns which get to a more granular level than just referring to gender and the personal gender of somebody. They're actually referring to the function in the given sentence that we just said that person has, either subject, right, agent, or object, patient, or in the case of Muscogee, non-subject. It's a little bit more broad than just objects. But yeah, this is my first video on YouTube. One take, just talking to you guys. If you guys liked it, please like, comment, subscribe. I post a lot on Instagram and TikTok. I have a good following there, but I'm not a huge fan of what's happening to those platforms. They're getting hijacked. And I feel like the people here maybe want to hear me ramble a little bit more, and perhaps the editing on these videos don't have to be as intense as when you make a 1 second, when you make a 1 to 3 minute video on TikTok and Instagram. It actually takes a lot more time because, you know, you have to find a way of condensing all of the things you want to say into that little time. And I got a lot to say. So yeah, let me know in the comments about any other languages which have these switch reference techniques or these referential pronouns that you use that we just don't have in English. And yeah, thank you to Human 1011 for showing us the gay fanfic problem and making it more popular. I'm very glad to see that. Ciao, valeu, falou.